Hello there, and welcome to another Ninth Age battle report here on Agoners. It's going to be another battle of Essence of War, and it's going to once again be done on Tabletop Simulator. So we'll be looking at some screenshots. It's another battle I didn't play in, however, so I shall be talking about this one. And response has been pretty good to these videos so far, actually, on my channel. I've been really pleased that a lot of people seem to be enjoying them. And this one was, I would say, popular demand, but at least some demand was put on me for this one, so let's get into it. So yes, as you can see, this is a proxy table gaming battle off. The two guys here, Lucky Sixes, who is new to this one for me, and Hyper G, who we saw last time around, playing it off in an inter proxy table gaming group. I'm going to call them a posse, yeah, the proxy table gaming posse here, because there's more than this. These two guys actually. If you check out their channel, they've got a couple of other guys I think involved with them now. So very cool to see. But yes, they both played against each other here. So yeah, this is really fascinating to watch. Once again, I did watch this live on the Veil of Ages Twitch channel. I was cooking at the time, so I didn't follow all of it in as much detail as I sometimes could. But hopefully, I picked up enough to be able to do some of my commentary on it and give you a little report about what happened. So first of all, we'll look at the armies, of course. These are once again the Essence of War patrols. So you can't choose your force; you get given a force, and you've got to do your best with it. The Warriors of the Dark Gods would be played by Lucky Sixes. As he was a bit newer to this, he got the we're not sure. They've been doing pretty well in playtesting, and this is the one list that's kind of under a bit of a microscope within the Essence of War team about are they a bit too strong or not. We're not sure though. We'll see how they get on in this one. Warriors of the Dark Gods, we did talk about them before, but this one, and it has been actually fully published in the alpha version, so we've got the full list here with all the stats. Again, go and download it from Ninth Age website if you want to get hold of all of this. But yeah, they've got a sorcerer, a couple of spells, rot within. Molten Copper. Molten Copper is an attack spell that is very good against armored foes, but pretty useless if they're not armored. Rot Within is a debuff on the enemy unit, and they've got this small blocks of infantry. They've got the warriors, really tough though, amazing armor, powerful, everything. They've got absolutely everything going for them really. And they've got a unit called the Fallen, much smaller unit, but still pretty dangerous in the right circumstances. And they're a little bit quicker actually, so they've got that going for them. And they've got the tough warrior knights, which are really tough cavalry, but only three of them. And yeah, so we'll look at the Empire list, which again we've seen before. This Empire Sonstyle. Again, we have this one taken from within the Tabletop Simulator right now because we don't have a fully published list for these guys yet. But yeah, we did look at these for 10 light infantry, 5 electoral cavalry, and 15 Imperial Guard plus a wizard. Wizard's got Corruption of 10, which reduces the enemy's armor, which is pretty useful against this list because you'll see most of them do have quite a bit of armor, so certainly some use for that one. Will make a bit of a difference in certain combats, I would expect. Scorching Salvo, always useful, although the only problem with this one, again, it has 0 armor penetration, so not perhaps as strong against the Warriors list as it might otherwise be. I've been joined by my cat Max here, if I seem distracted. He's very interested in this battle report, wants to give you his commentary on it at the same time. Yeah, Scorching Salvo, not super good against Warriors of the Dark Gods, but again, as we talked about before, they don't have the numbers, so even if you lose 1 or 2 guys on a bad roll, that could be critical. So we'll see how those plays out in this one. Yeah, the other thing to note is once again this Warriors unit is so tough, right? Probably none of these Empire Assault style units can really take them head on, which makes this matchup really tricky. I learnt this the hard way. If you watch my battle report when I played the Kingdom of Aquitaine against these Warriors list, I have certainly learnt my lesson. No doubt these two players, obviously a lot more experienced at the 9th Age than I am, so I'm sure they are both well aware of these, the sort of the way these stats and combats interact a bit more than I was. So hopefully they won't make the same mistake I will do, and charge headlong with your cavalry into the warriors, and yeah, meet a sad demise. Right, so let's get on. These were the Hyper G won the roll off to go first, but then has to deploy first. And IPG did astutely point out actually that it probably wasn't a great thing always going first, especially with this matchup, right? So one thing that the Empire do have going for them here is they've got quite a lot of missile firepower. So we talked about Scorching Salvo, but they've also got these handgunners. Now these handgunners have strength 4 AP2 shooting, which is pretty strong, and particularly against this Warriors list, they're almost like really ideal because you need high AP to be able to get through their armor and actually scare them with shooting. And these guys definitely do that. All the Warriors units have got to respect them basically. And so, ideally, you might think, well, normally first turn first, you go first, you get to shoot first, right? But the only issue is because of the way the setup zones are exactly the range of their guns, if you go first, you probably won't be able to shoot on the first turn without moving, which obviously reduces your effectiveness. And you might say, oh, but the opponent doesn't have to move towards me if I'm going second. But because of the way the objective works and the way these lists interact, you probably do. So yeah, Hyper G did get a bit unlucky there on getting having to set up first and having to take the first turn. But I mean, I think we'll talk more about the setup in the overview. But yes, and so we'll just show you the overview map. That was the Warriors list, of course, dropping like that. But yeah, it's easier to see on the overhead map what was happening. So I did mention. Oh, sorry. These are RH World Buildings, beautiful Empire guys once again. And I can't remember. I'm sorry. I think it's Danila. I think Piteo did say this was another actual forum user who's made these. They're only black sort of shadowy troops, these ones, but they still look pretty cool and a little bit evocative of the warriors of the very, very dark gods. You know, very dark indeed. So dark you can almost see them. It's the black that's so dark your eye almost slides off it, or whatever cheesy reference you want to use there. If any of you get that quote, by the way, I'll be super impressed. Anyway, right, so this was the setup. So Hyper-G had to drop first on this side, chose this side of the board. He did complain about my highly critical comments about his deployment last time. But actually, I don't have too many issues with this, especially the side option, because honestly, this board is like almost a mirror image, right? Both sides have got like a building and a wood on them. The hill's like almost like in the center of the board, but a bit off center. So the main objective point's about here, I think, maybe a little higher up. Um, so yeah, it's kind of like it doesn't really matter where you deploy, particularly given the matchup. It's like you've got the shooting list versus the all combat list, right? So you've got good spaces. I think the only thing he's done this kind of double line with the Knights in reserve. I imagine he's trying to hold the Knights back a little bit because of that Molten Copper spell, and he doesn't want to get because although the Molten Copper spell's pretty powerful against both of these units, the Imperial Guard have got the numbers to take a few of them and not really worry about it, whereas the Knights do not. So that might be part of the thinking here to create this dual line. Um, I still think it's a risky thing to do in Essence of War, particularly, and possibly in the Ninth Age in general, because of the way your units can quite easily get in the way of each other if you're not very careful. Now, putting the more maneuverable unit at the back, again, it's also the more vulnerable unit to the limited ranged options that the Warriors do have. So again, it makes sense why it's been placed at the back. Um, we actually saw RH World Building when he played with this warrior list against me. He put his Fallen at the back in a similar way. But the Fallen are a bit smaller, a little bit easier at wheeling, so I don't know. The thing I made me think actually looking at this game again, I might have been tempted. These knights again because there's only a few of them and they only have one attack each. They're not a massive combat threat, but they are very dangerous in the flanks. So much like I would use the Goblin Raiders and the Orcs of Goblin list in Essence of War, I'd be really tempted to have put these guys on the flank. And again, they have an ideal, especially when you know you're going first, right? You've got an ideal potential to get up here, turn, and then be in this kind of like threatening position here, looking down towards the center of the board. And any units then that move in have to be very careful how they maneuver so they don't let you get them in the flank. Um, so that was anyway. That's enough about Hyper-G's setup. Lucky sixes, however, again, it just kind of guess put the guys down. Sorry, one more thing to comment. The wizard out on his own, absolutely love that. because with the lack of ranged output from the warriors list, it's really safe to put your wizard by himself. Again, he could be targeted by the molten copper in that situation, but he doesn't have any armor. Neither do these light infantry. So this is the guys that he's actually happy getting hit with molten copper, which is possibly why they're over this side of the hill there. Um, whereas these guys are a bit more protected by this hill as well, making it a little bit harder for this the warrior's sorcerer, evil sorcerer, just sorcerer. I don't know. I don't know who. I'm going to call her a she, by the way. Probably throughout this battle report accidentally. You can take your genders however you like with the with the Ninth Age. But yeah, I'm actually painting up a Warriors of the Dark Gods list right now. So yeah, and my sorcerer is a lady. So yes, so I should I'll probably say she by accident at some point during this bat rep. So yeah, but anyway, the evil sorcerer. Yeah, they're a little bit protected from them, and it also so again putting the wizard by himself from the Empire side, you actually kind of want that wizard to get targeted, right? Because that's the fairly not particularly vulnerable target. It could do some damage, but again, you'd much rather take a few hit points on your wizard than you would like lose your entire cavalry unit, for example. So yeah, definitely want to kind of almost bait the opponent to do that rather than anything else. So yeah, really, I know I'm a bit more confused by Lucky Six's deployment, I guess. Um, Fairly standard stuff, infantry, like supported by the knights. I feel like the sorcerer could be placed more aggressively, maybe, but again, has to be wary of getting shot down and magicked down by these slots. So I guess looking for a way to run forward into cover here. Um, Fallen opposite the handgunners though, really surprised me. So this Fallen unit is very vulnerable to like they're most lightly armored slightly of the warrior guys here. Actually probably on a par with the sorry on a par with the warriors, the Fallen and the warriors. I think are the same sort of resilience and armor and things like that. But there's only four of them, right? So if they do lose one or two, they're immediately taking panic checks. So because they're the most vulnerable to both the scorching salvo coming out of this wizard and any firepower coming out of these handgunners, I thought it was a really surprising move, especially knowing that Hyper G had the first turn. You're just like, yeah, he's put them against the two things that they don't want to get shot by, right? And I'm like, I guess it's a decoy or just a throwaway unit. He's kind of yeah, again, we talked about this one last time actually by using your Goblin Raiders as a kind of a decoy. And Hyper G was doing that, going well. I've kind of lost this unit, or they're not particularly useful maybe in this matchup, but I'm going to use them to be a pain for my opponent, just sort of draw their fire as it were. Maybe that's what Lucky Six is going for. I can't be sure though. I mean, I definitely probably would have done this if I was Warriors. I would be very tempted to do what Rob RH World Building did in the past, which was kind of keep your fallen back because they are quite vulnerable at ranged against a lot of these. Got a lot of these guys, but I mean, I guess it worked out. Again, I might have preferred the fallen to be maybe down here with like a way to swing round here and then cause again they're almost like a flanking unit in their own right, and the warrior knights are somewhere in between because they possibly can take units onto the front, but maybe they can't. Depends on the matchup. So yeah, both deployments had things basically that I was like, oh, that surprised me a little bit. But you know, these two know what they're doing, so we can't complain too much. Although I did say after the game they had quite an interesting discussion, and they did point out that playing Essence of War in particular is a slightly different mindset than playing fantasy battles, particularly because it's all about the objective. So yeah, I mean that's a very good point, and Mateo did make a good point as well that it kind of evens the odds sometimes if you are a new player and you want to pick up Essence of War and you're playing against a very experienced Ninth Age player, you might be a little bit intimidated by that potentially. But I would say in some ways, as a new player, you do have a few things going for you, which was Pateo's point. Given that you're coming to this new and afresh, and you can just take Essence of War and think about how it works for what it is, and you're not kind of like half a brain thinking on a slightly different, more advanced game where there's more things you have to take in consideration. In Essence of War, it does keep things quite simple, and if you keep your focus on the right things, it's very important. So on to turn one anyway, and if I'm rambling on from me as I like to do. Yeah, so quite a fairly aggressive move up, not particularly, I guess. So what Hyper G is trying to do here is obviously he's got the first turn. He knows he's got the first turn. He's seen these fallen all out here asking to be shot at. So he does swing his handgunners forward a little bit to get them into range. It will be long range and they will have moved. But yeah, so they're still going to be able to hit on sixes, and there's 10 of them, so they're not bad. And the fair chance of getting through even their high resilience, high armor isn't all that against the handguns because they're very powerful. He's also managed to get his wizard far enough forward. We see the 24-inch range there, but his 18-inch range on his Scorching Salvo will definitely catch these fallen. I think he couldn't get quite within range of, yeah, I think he's moved as far as he can there. Like just looking how far he's moved. Couldn't get quite within range of another unit, which was a bit of a shame. Maybe there was a way to nudge him down a little bit more towards this way. Might have been able to get 2 units in, not sure. I like this. We talked about this in another matchup as well. I quite like this moving forward with the Imperial Guard, even though you're probably, you can't take any of these units head on necessarily. Well, not the Warriors block for sure anyway. Although the Imperial Guard would probably do pretty well against the Fallen or the Warrior Knights, unless they get some bad rolls. It's not a gimme, but they should be able to take them. Even though they're kind of matched up against a bad unit for them to fight in the main Warriors, pushing forward still gives the opponent some pause to do you want to move forward as far as you can, or do you want to keep out of a potential charge from them? So yeah, pushing forward aggressively basically puts their threat range out forward onto the opponent, basically. So if you do get the first turn, even if you want to play defensively, overall, like a maneuver like that, I really like it because again, you're basically scaring your opponent, saying, "Do you want to come into potential charge range of this unit?" Rather than if you sit completely back, you're giving your opponent free reign to maneuver how they like on the battlefield. So yeah, a good little tip there. And then these cavalry slightly wheeled round behind them. Again, the problem with this double line thing is they're a little bit stuck. So again, imagine if they'd been up here and swinging round to maybe here by this point. Quite like that if that had been an option maybe to think about. I mean, the other thing is that because of the if you're playing with the Orcs and Goblins, you have to be careful that you keep within your general's range for the discipline. Here, the general doesn't really offer any benefit whatsoever to any of the troops in terms of discipline. So actually, they can kind of ignore that bubble effect, as they call it in Ninth Age lingo. People talk about the bubble around your general. That's the 12-inch range where the general's discipline can improve the discipline of your troops. But the Empire patrol is one that doesn't have to care about that. So the general's essentially irrelevant. It's just a nominal title. And there's actually quite a cool story on the forum right now. If any of you do follow the Ninth Age at all and go onto the forum, there's a campaign called the Craven Lands, which is a really cool little interactive campaign. And in that, there's a bit of a story about this Empire Assault style patrol developing, and it does explain how does this wizard, who's now called Max officially, how does he end up in command, even though he's not a commander. It's pretty cool stuff, actually. I really recommend it. So yeah, I generally do. I think again, I think the Knights. I'm not sure about them. The Electoral Cavalry, sorry. Not sure about what Hyper-G's doing with these really, but everything else I really really like. Does get off a magic phase, of course. We go to that. Gets a pretty decent 1-4-2. I think he was upset about that because he wanted to 5 dice spells immediately, despite the miscast last game. But yeah, I mean, I think 4-2 is actually ideal because the only thing he just wants to cast Scorching Salvo. So all it really matters is how many dice, what's your max dice versus your opponent's dice. And obviously with 4-2, he does get a 15, which I think he couldn't possibly dispel it on a 15. So it did hit them and did get 3 hits and then some terrible roll in and a good armor save and didn't damage any of them. So that was really disappointing. And then the handgunners firing on 6s should probably kill 1 maybe anyway. And again, he only needs to kill 1 for a panic check so that could have been probably should have been a panic check from that Scorching Salvo. And then maybe I believe, I'll double check this one, if you can get 2 panic, it's different phases. So I think you can take a panic check in the magic phase, and you can also take another panic check potentially in the shooting phase. Doesn't kill any. So a really, really unlucky first turn there from Hyper G. And I think that was part of his plan when he saw this setup from Lucky Sixes, was to try and hopefully whittle down significantly and hopefully panic those fallen on the first turn, which would have taken them out of the game immediately. That would have been great, but unfortunately doesn't work out for him. The dice not in his favour there. Lucky Six is living up to his name at this point, so yeah. So we're going into Lucky Six's next turn. Does a really aggressive move like this. Now, again, I suspect these fallen are essentially being used as I wouldn't say chaff, but they're like almost being thrown away here because he's kind of like really just running up into these guns, right? The flaming and guns and everything. Don't care. I mean, fallen. I guess they wouldn't care in the lore either, but like. I don't know. As a general, again, I'm not sure. They might have been better placed somewhere else. I love this move though with the warriors. So he does decide to move up. He's actually put, I believe it's two of them onto the hill, which is pretty cunning because they're, if you imagine they're like coming over the hill but not quite onto the hill, right? So they can see over though, so they're aware of where the Imperial Guard and gunners and everything is. They can see everything from for the two that can spot, right? So they could make charges anywhere next turn potentially. But he's kept himself in cover, unless I'm very much mistaken, because only half of the frontage of that unit can be seen by the gunners. So if Hyper G chooses to try and shoot these warriors, they're somewhat protected by the over like the arc of the hill, I guess you'd call it. So that's a pretty cool move. I don't know if that's on purpose or that's like just how far we could get that turn, but I do like it a lot. The sorcerer's pushed up. Two of them right now, and you can see what's happened. It's the way you do the movement of a single character. The easiest way to move a single character model in Tabletop Simulator. There's to copy paste them and maneuver them. So there aren't two sorcerers. She doesn't have the magic power to bifurcate or whatever. Anyway, but yeah, getting better line of sight for spells. I suspect that's mostly about. I think she's getting within 18-inch range as well of those electoral cavalry. And again, I like this sort of flanking maneuver with these knights, but not going. So let me see. Yeah, again, that must have been a. Oops, sorry, going back too far. Um, Not getting. Yeah, I'm not sure that was. It must have been a wheel one way and then a wheel back the other way to get that kind of movement there. So quite clever positioning though. Nothing wrong about that. Again, keeping that front arc out. And we saw sort of Rob kind of swung too far with his cavalry in the other game and like ended up round the back of units and they were able to move forward and get out the arc. But there's no such problems here from this positioning from a pro player, Lucky Six is. I'm not sure he's a. We don't really have pro players in tabletop gaming, but I'm used to sort of other video gaming where there are actually some professional players, as it were, that you sometimes have to come up against. And it's anyway. Let's move it on quickly. So I like all this, but again, not sure whether maybe Lucky Six wasn't too sure what to do with the Fallen, but yeah, as the Hyper G has kind of got his cavalry almost out of the game, these maybe these fallen are still doing a bit more than that by putting a little bit of pressure on. Um, so yeah, we move to the magic phase. Does get off. It has a load of dice. I can't remember exactly what card it was, but it certainly had an advantage in dice here, and does some pretty good rolling. Gets off a molten copper on the cavalry, but only kills one of them, which isn't too bad, but doesn't force a panic check. So that's pretty good news for Hyper G. All being told, I think he probably would have liked to have tried to stop that spell, but I think he didn't have. I think the dice roll was too high, and he could not stop it no matter what. Could try to stop the rot within, but fails to. Very unlucky. The rot within goes off on the Imperial Guard, which may or may not help. It does do a little bit actually, because they've got some pretty high skills, particularly a defensive skill, because they've got shields. The way we represent there's a rule in Ninth Age fantasy battles called parry, where units with swords and shields get extra defense, basically. Um, they have swords and shields, but we don't have so many extra rules in Essence of War. Try and keep things like more on the base stat line for most units. So the way we represent this special rule is just pump up their defensive stat. So they've got a really high defense, but the rot within does bring that down. So that's pretty might be key. So yeah, pretty unlucky kind of magic phase from Hyper G's side there, and pretty lucky one from Lucky Six's side, because did get off both spells, which is pretty hard to do. The way it's tuned in Essence of War is you probably can get off one spell a turn, and it's pretty hard to get off both, but you can certainly with certain dice rolls and certain magic phases. It's not impossible. So good phase there for Lucky Sixes. Let's go into, and obviously he was constantly, I was making jokes about all his potent shooting he was going to use, like hurling insults and other such shooting attacks were going off from the warriors of the Dark Dogs, of course, slightly mocking the fact they don't have any missile capacity whatsoever. I think the only patrol I think that doesn't have any missile troops, because we've tried to give every faction a little bit of everything so they can kind of play in all the phases as it were. But warriors just don't have it. Just don't have that stuff. They just don't. I don't think they do in fantasy battles either. I don't think they have any missile troops in there either. But I mean, they do have an offensive spell, so they've kind of got some ranged ability, even if it isn't shooting. Moving into turn two. Now this is where things get really, really interesting. Um, what would you do here, dear viewer, if you were Hyper G? So I thought he would try to charge here with Imperial Guard on the Fallen. Um, and I thought, despite the cover, he'd try and take some pot shots because you basically got to damage this Warriors unit, right? If you want to beat it, um, in combat, certainly, or hopefully you'll manage to damage enough and get a panic check, right? But assuming you can't actually kill them off with shooting, right? But you still want to be able to damage them and weaken them a little bit, because if they lose a few guys, they do start to become a lot weaker and a lot more possibility that a unit like the Imperial Guard could actually beat them in combat. Or maybe the knights on the flank, something like that. Again, though, if the knights had been up here, right, this movement from the fallen would have been suicidal. So yeah, just to kind of rewind, I can't get that thought out of my head. I just what if the knights were on the electoral cavalry? So I shouldn't call them knights because these are warrior knights, the electoral cavalry. But I mean, they're all Knigits at the end of the day, aren't they? Let's face it. Um, yeah, so anyway, what he actually does, but yeah, wouldn't charge them because that would be pretty suicidal. I actually did some of the maths on that actually. Even in the front, even with a good charge, undamaged, the Imperial Guard are probably going to lose 4 or 5 guys, and they're probably only going to kill maybe 2. So it's pretty iffy. Like even in the front, they might win on the charge, but yeah, they might not. It's very dicey. So that's just how powerful these warriors are. If you've killed like maybe 3 already, then like the odds start to go up quite significantly in your favor because you'll reduce the attacks back, and obviously there's a good chance of them not having a rank at that point. But yeah, despite how this might look, these warriors are pretty just so tough. The Imperial Guard don't want to charge them, but they probably, I mean, again, they'd probably take some damage from the Fallen because the Fallen are pretty high agility, if I remember correctly. So they'd probably lose 2 or 3, but they should kill 2 or 3. And then if they're charging and with their ranks, they should definitely make these Fallen run away. Which if they did that, they could then potentially wipe these Fallen. And by the way, if the Fallen run, I can't remember exactly how their Path of the Exiled rule works, but if I remember correctly, they pretty much always get wiped. Um, but say you went for that charge, made it. I can't think it's very far. Like, must only be like a 4 or 5 on the dice, I would expect, by looking at that. Is that 8, maybe 9, 10 inches? So if it's 10 inches, you need a 6 on the dice, which is still pretty good odds, right? 6 plus on 2 dice is reasonable odds. Um, yeah, I honestly would have taken that charge, because it doesn't give me as good things to do with my shooting. Because again, this is a very tasty shot as well. Like shooting those handgunners into these fallen is very, very good. They're very likely to kill a bunch of them and cause a panic test, right? But given the positioning of all of this, I think I would have taken that. Hopefully, wiped them out. Almost certainly cause them to break, or Path of the Exiled kill themselves, whatever, however that works. I'd have to double check that if I was playing this game. But then you'd get to reform hopefully and face these warriors. So I mean, they'd still probably come in and go for you, but well, we'll see ahead of this. I think so. I'm pretty sure Hyper G though, what he does anyway, forget all of that. What he chooses to do is to make this charge here, which is, I was like, what? So it's a long bomb charge, right? He needs a 10 on the dice. Now, this was very popular at the time. Potato was very impressed with this. Lucas was very impressed with this. I must admit, it's not my play style. Maybe it's going for those long bomb lucky rolls. I guess it's just I've just bitter experience has taught me I'm just not lucky enough to go for these kind of things. It's not a viable way to play. So I probably would never do this. But obviously there is a time when you should just take a charge anyway, even if it's unlikely. Is if there's no downside. Um, so I guess the upside is, if he makes it, as unlikely as it is, these Imperial Guards should definitely beat these Warrior Knights, right? So they strike first. They're probably going to kill one or two, maybe one of them, hopefully two of them, right? And then but that's almost irrelevant. What mostly matters is there's not enough knights to really kill that many Imperial Guard, no matter what happens, even with sort of pretty good rolls. They'll probably only kill like three, maybe a bit more. They have got the rock within on them though, so this is one of the factors here actually. So maybe that was why he didn't want to take that charge against the Fallen. Not sure. Um, hmm. Many things you could have done here though. Another thing you could have done actually is shuffle backwards. So I did this actually in one of my games with the Orc unit. Again, I took that first turn, kind of move forward, make a threat range, but then when the opponent decides to charge me back, or could potentially charge me back, I actually move backwards with them to try and keep out of charge range. So it's kind of like push forward to threaten and then withdraw to kind of like to keep away from the opponent. Might have been another option, making it quite hard. I guess the only unit that might be able to charge them would have been the Fallen then, because they've got a little bit faster move. I don't know. We'd have to have done measure the ranges on that one to see whether that was a good idea. But yeah, I guess the upside is if he makes this, as I say, the Imperial Guard should be able to beat the Warrior Knights pretty well, just through strength of numbers and also the charging bonuses if they should make that. However, there seems to be a significant downside to failing it, right? Because the Imperial Guard are going to end up somewhere around here, like kind of in no man's land, potentially getting flank charged by the Fallen, potentially getting charged from the Warriors, all pretty bad stuff, but I'm pretty sure Hyper G had thought all this through because he's got a really good plan with these guys. So we'll see that come to fruition and why he goes for this charge despite the risks and the unlikelihood of making it, which he doesn't, and ends up there. So yeah, didn't get the very lucky 10 roll, which yeah, you're unlikely to get that anyway. I'm sure you've got to have a plan, but he does have a plan. And what he does is move up like this, so he then thought about actually, he did think this charge could have been made with the Knights against the Fallen, which I would have loved actually. It's one of those ones, it's a weird one, right? So you'd go, well, they can't charge them here because there's no way they can get through this block of Imperial Guard. But what you are allowed to do when you declare a charge, right, you take other charges that have already been declared. You've got to do them in order. Like the order of the way you do things is very actually very critical at times. It's where a lot of the really complicated decision making comes in, and we're gonna spoilers. We're gonna see some really crazy charge stuff coming up in the midst of this battle. I can assure you. But yeah, so I think what he could have done was declare this charge, and then before you roll it, declare this charge, right? Because these are likely to get out of the way, meaning that's a potential charge there against the Fallen. I would have liked that. I think that would have been even better than what happens, and it would have caused this kind of bundle up issue here to resolve itself. Because again, because of Hyper G's sort of deployment in two lines like this, it does sort of these units are kind of getting in each other's way. So this would be one way to get out of it. Would be declare a charge on one angle and a charge on another angle with the second line. I think that would have been. This might have been where this battle kind of went actually differently. Actually, it's quite a critical point in the battle. These first turns and how you choose to do it, like really matter in essence of war. That's why if you don't know what you're doing, you can often kind of go really wrong really quickly and go, oh man, and then next time, hopefully play another game. It's worth playing a few games often with the same patrol if you're new to it, because you'll sort of realise, hang on, if I'd done this and done that, and yeah, if you think it through. Anyway, so he ends up failing his charge like that, and this charge wasn't unfortunately declared, even though now you can see it would have been a pretty clear run through there with these knights, so that would have worked out beautifully. And that distance isn't actually too bad for them with their advanced 7. I think they probably only needed a 7 or something on the dice. Um, but I say Hyper G had a plan because brave Maximilian the Wizard comes running in. This is some really cool stuff. I was going to say, I know these guys wanted me to give them some commentary and thoughts on this game, but like when I see like cool maneuvers like this, I almost don't feel qualified because I don't think I've ever managed to chaff anything. I mean, I haven't played much of this kind of game anyway, but I've certainly never done anything like this. I've looked for the potential of it, and I've seen the potential when my opponents can do it. I suppose I've done it once actually in the old Ninth Age Quick Starter. I did do some cheesy stuff with my Goblin Wizard once, managing to get in the way. What you can see is he's ran in the way of these Fallen, blocking them off. So there's no way these Fallen can get round to charge the Imperial Guard in the flanks. So this guy is basically, would call it chaffing. He's kind of suiciding himself to get in the way to protect the flank of another unit. So bravely ran the wizard right to get in the way. He's also positioned himself pretty nicely for all of his spells. So we'll go to the magic phase next. And I can't remember the one. I think it was 6 to 4. He went for a 1 dice. I do remember this one. They went for a 1 dice corruption of tin because why not? You might roll a 5, so I quite like that. Didn't roll it, and then rolled a 5 dice scorching salvo. Only got a 15, but lucky six's 4 dice only gets a 10. So yeah, like again, one more dice, you're pretty likely to get it off. So it wasn't like completely unexpected that he managed to get off scorching salvo, but look at the range on that. So yeah, this is a huge kaboom. Nothing's engaged, of course. So all of these get hit. This is actually the only time. Again, we noticed that I did say at the start of the game, Lucky Sixes chose to run the Sorcerer solo, which is normally the thing to do with the Warriors of the Dark Gods. Because if you put the Sorcerer in a combat unit, you lose one of your big fighty dudes, which is not great. And again, yeah, you kind of have to play the Sorcerer separately, really, in the Warriors of the Dark Gods. But if ever there was a matchup where you consider putting the Sorcerer in a unit, it might be this one, but just because of the dangerous spells and missile power of the Empire list. But yeah, here we go. Look, this is what I was saying about Scorching Salvo. Its range is so big on this small board, right? It's almost impossible to avoid it, and it catches every single unit with it. So that was great. Rolls the D3s. We've got 2 hits here, 3 hits here, 3 hits here, 3 hits here. So a little bit under average on the hits there, but still nothing to be complaining about, really. However, if I remember correctly, after all those hits, managed to do no damage to the Fallen, no damage to the Warriors, no damage to the... Did kill one Warrior Knight, though, which is big. But, I mean, again, this Hyper G was saying, like, he really needed thought he needed some good early turns to get some missiles, some range damage on the Warriors list to really come through in this game. And yeah, it really wasn't happening for him, unfortunately. So yeah, it felt like he was a bit on the back foot. I think that was part of the reasoning behind this long charge and this chaffing and all this kind of business was partly trying to make some big plays to come back in the game. And that Scorching Salvo really could have been a big play. And of course, the past the panic check here, so that would have been great if they panicked. That would have been almost certainly straight off the board because they're right on the edge there. But yeah, unfortunately, Hyper G really disappointing Scorching Salvo overall. Would have hoped to have killed a couple of more guys, at least get some wounds on this sorcerer or something, right? Yeah, very disappointed. We move to the shooting phase though. And the handgunners unleash a powerful salvo. It's actually in short range. I remember this looks like it's more than 12 inches, but I believe it isn't. And although this wizard is standing in the way, each individual model can still see clearly, so there's no problems of cover because the wizard's pretty small. If you've got a big enough base model in the way, it could potentially block some things. They could get a cover bonus for that, but no, the wizard ain't going to give no cover to those big fallen. And roll some pretty tasty dice here. I won't go through all these dice rolling, but yeah, kaboom, wipes out the fallen, which I mean was pretty lucky, not crazy lucky though. So that was really good. Now so the wizard suddenly feeling pretty good about things, right? Ran in to try and just to protect the flank, and then the unit look at the covering fire, the first rank fire, second rank independents fire at will, and they blow these guys to smithereens. I think, by the way, I was watching this one and I was cooking at the time. I think I was cutting my carrots and my celery at this point. I can't remember, but it was a very tasty dinner, guys. But yeah, blew them all away. And I think they forgot to make a panic check because there is actually, if a unit gets wiped out, these warriors should have had to take a panic check of that, and I don't think they did. I mean, sure Lucky Six would have used his customary luck to make that one, but I don't know. Like, could have got away with one there, lads. I don't know. That's what I'm saying. But yeah, it wasn't to be anyway. But still, I mean, overall, the Scorching Salvo very disappointing. But that kind of missile fire kind of makes up for it. But again, could have, I guess, if you killed 4, you could have argued at long range with the cover might have killed a couple of these guys instead. So again, rewinding how it could have been, maybe you could have had these guys shooting at them with maybe killing a couple of them, maybe forcing a panic check that way, charging in there, and then the Scorching Salvo still would have hit all three of those. So anyway, that was a good swing though. I mean, losing a unit, right? This is one of the things with the Warriors list, because they have so few guys, although they're very powerful. You do see things like this. Now suddenly they're down 2 units to 3. And that's a pretty big deal for the scoring because every unit counts. Even if there's just one guy left, that'd be great. But unfortunately, they don't have anything left. And also, subtle thing is obviously, again, we've seen this wizard, the things he could do running about by himself. And because the Warriors list doesn't have any reason to scare someone to not running their character solo, like it kind of gives the opposition a bit more an opportunity to do some clever stuff with their characters like this. So yeah, just some balancing factors that we're considering with these Essence of War patrols. Yeah, on to the Warriors' turn though. So Lucky Sixes turn 2. Let's get this right. Yeah, Lucky Six turn 2 declares a charge here with these Warriors against the Imperial Guard. Now, as we said, when all this long bomb charge and everything happened from Hyper G, he did have this plan. So his plan was to protect the flank with the wizard, and then also I believe he'd obviously planned for this flee because he immediately said, "Yep, I'm fleeing." Okay, now this got pretty complicated. It actually got me running to my rule book to double check things actually after the game because I was like, did they do all this right? Wow, honestly I'd not seen as complicated a charge situation as this because we had pretty much everything going off that can go off here, right, guys? So, and I believe that, but I double checked it all because again I'm not as familiar with the full rules of Ninth Age as these guys are by any means. And although I am very familiar with the Essence of War rules, I've still only got limited experience. So, but yeah, so the way they did all this correctly, I believe. Anyway, but we are thinking I might need to maybe add some notes or some extra wording into these rules because it is pretty complicated. So the Warriors declare a charge against the Imperial Guard, who declare a flee reaction, and that flee is immediately rolled. And I believe it was a very low roll of about only a few inches anyway. The what? Oh no, apologies. No, you don't roll it immediately. First of all, he has to say, "Do I want to redirect?" Um, and he did choose to redirect into the wizard and did make the discipline check necessary to do a redirect. So yeah, declare the charge. If the opponent flees with that unit and you want to attempt to redirect, you can make a discipline check then. If you can redirect, you have to say if you're doing it at that point. Then you roll this flee distance, which was very short. But then he could decide what to do with the wizard, right? Now, at this point, he just chose to hold with the wizard. Now, I think that was pretty wise because they hadn't fled very far, and they'd elected to redirect into the wizard. Should Hyper G have fled with both units that these declared charges against, they can then decide which one they go after, right? But if one of these units, if you declare a charge and they flee, and then the other unit holds that you've redirected into, you have to go with your redirect, right? Whereas I was like thinking, well, why wouldn't you flee with this wizard as well, right? Because okay, these warriors are going to end up in a whatever, not a great position. But even if ideally, you'd want them to fail a charge, right? Have a chance to rally both these units, and they're still not in a great position. They'd end up just like stood milling about on this hill, like not doing anything, and you get to shoot them, and maybe the wizard rallies and gets to cast spells. But again, I believe the reason why Hyper G chose to hold with the wizard was to make sure, because he'd already rolled that really low roll with the Imperial Guard, there was a good chat or fair chance on a decent charge roll that if the Warriors had stayed going after the Imperial Guard, they would have caught them and wiped them out. But by holding with the wizard, they were then forced to go with that redirect and couldn't continue to charge the Imperial Guard. So I think that was all very, very clever from Hyper G. Again, I'm absolutely certain they did all this correctly based on the rules because I went and just double checked them all. And the other thing then, though, that Lucky Sixes did that was really clever, I warned you this was going to get complicated, right? He then declared a charge from the Warrior Knights on the Imperial Guard as well, right? And because they're already fleeing, by the way, that flee direction from the Imperial Guard, a bit hard to see on these screenshots because we've not got them subsequent, right? But yeah, it's center to center. So it's like if you imagine a central point in the warriors and the central point, they run in that direction. So that's accurately done here. But because they hadn't gone very far, this was still a valid potential charge from the warrior knights. And what happens is if a unit's already fleeing, they flee again. So now they're going to flee again, but along this path, center to center. And he rolled this 2d6 and ended up, I think it was about 7 he got, ended up right there, which means they have to, because they've clipped into this other friendly unit, they then have to bounce through to the other side, and you've got to get an inch clear. So they end up doing like a, because of that double charge, really smart from Lucky Sixes to force them to flee through. I mean, even if they hadn't fled through though, so they'd ended up just in front of those gunners, right? That still would have been awful. This is again one of the problems with this double line issue, that your own units start fleeing through it, even though yeah, the intention to flee was a great plan, because it's just like taking a charge from those warriors would probably be suicide, and you'd probably lose the unit anyway. So I really like the decision to flee with the Imperial Guard. Um, if you're going to lose the fight, right, it's usually better to flee than try and fight it out. There are circumstances in which you've just got to go for it, right? But this certainly wasn't one of them, so I really like that decision to flee. But yeah, again, the problem was that it was causing all these units to get in a bundle and mess each other up. And the other thing is, if you flee through your own unit, they then take a panic check as well. So the handgunners had to make a panic check, and luckily rolls a 3. So a couple of very low rolls on this turn from Hyper G. Keeps these units around, but yeah, not ideal still with the positioning. These Imperial Guard are like almost out of the game, not quite at this point already. But yeah, it's a shame that yeah, it's, well, I say smart play from Lucky Six is really going for the double charge to force that big flee movement and get them in the direction he wanted them going. So yeah, that really clever stuff. But clever stuff from both players, basically. To be honest, really nice decision making, and very impressed with that. Um, and I can't remember what this is all rolling out. Yeah, just rolling out the charges and seeing how far they get to. So the warrior knights sort of stumble forward to here. This was actually in the flank of the wizard. It was calculated, so it's like the majority of the front arc of the unit, even though they're off the hill, but they can see, as we talked about last time. They end up, and again, you've got a bit of leeway in how you maneuver them. Goes from maneuvering like that, can only get 2 of them in, and chooses to get these 2 N2, so they'll get 1, 2, 3, 4 of them can fight that wizard due to the difference in base sizes. And again, the sorcerer just kind of does a little bit of a shimmy around. Not sure what he or she is up to there, but just trying to, just poking with spells, basically, just getting in range to get some spells off. Yeah, so that's the combat phase, and as you, oh sorry, the magic phase. Can't particularly remember what happens there. Oh, get stuff under the rot within on the electoral cavalry, just kind of making sure they don't come in with anything cheeky next turn. But I mean, they're not. They don't have any great targets right now anyway. But yeah, rot within on them, very frustrating. And then we get onto his combat. Does kill the wizards. Poor old Max. The first time he's got killed in a long time, actually. But is he really dead? Was he just? I think he was just feigning. I think he was just like clutching his sides and like running off into these woods or something. I'm sure he'll be back later in another battle. Anyway, but does technically, according to the game rules, defeat him. Luckily, he's out here, so the fact he's getting killed doesn't cause any panic checks for the Empire, so that's a nice little positioning. Then again, really good chaff positioning, to be honest, from this wizard, because by being that far out in front, no one else takes panic checks. The fact they do wipe him off, though, wipe him out, means they don't have to pursue, which would have been kind of ideal to have him running away, because then he might. Then obviously, I don't think these warriors would want to pursue him anyway off in this direction, because they're kind of getting further away from the objective. So they do choose to reform. So maybe a little bit lucky from Lucky Sixes there, being able to get that and reform how he wanted it, rather than having to choose to kind of chase off in that direction or reform. So yeah, didn't quite work out as best it could for the wizard there, but still not bad. But yeah, tricky situation Hyper G's got into here. And again, this wizard is doing some. Oh no, sorry, no. We're now on to Hyper G turn 3. Now, despite the rot within, or maybe because of the rot within on the electoral cavalry, as we've pointed out before, a direct charge into those warriors would be suicide. So they don't want to do that. I know Hyper G was considering the odds of these knights taking on the warrior knights, and it wasn't great, especially with Rot Within on. It was kind of like a dice thing because these guys have got 4 attacks, right? These have got 4 attacks, even though there's only 2 of them left. So they're kind of even on the attacks. They're all agility 0. These have got slightly better skills. Um, but they've got more guys, right? Which the more hit points does matter because if they lose one guy, they're immediately down to only 2 attacks the next turn. It's kind of iffy, like these 2 units fighting each other. If it's 5 plays 3, it's like more in the favour of the warrior knights, I would say. But when it's down to 4 plays 2, the losses basically are more important to the warriors. The odds start to drop off on their side much faster if you imagine it on a curve, as they lose guys from the unit, whereas the knights aren't quite as so the electoral cavalry aren't quite as bad. Anyway, Hyper G declares a charge against the sorcerer, which is very cheeky. I really like this move actually because although the sorcerer basically can't really damage these knights because he's got AP 0, so even though the sorcerer isn't terrible in combat, and the knights may or may not actually do much damage to the warrior's sorcerer, um, the fact they'd get the charge bonus and things like that, and the fact that they can't really get any damage back from her is like, well, that's pretty good. So again, very cool. And again, you probably get out of the charge arc of all these units. I really love this move. This was a fantastic charge. Unfortunately, though, or rather, and again, as we saw last turn, great plays from both players again in this turn. Lucky Sixes immediately choose to flee with the wizard rather than risk this situation where these electoral cavalry could get into a brilliant spot here, potentially, obviously breaking that wizard, causing a panic check, and these knights could then be could be reformed, like all kinds of horrible things could have gone off there. So really good flee. It's obviously disappointing to have to flee with any units on especially if you're warriors of the dark gods. But yeah, really clever flee there to make sure that this charge, or almost certainly, you can never be guarantee it, but like you'd almost certainly end up with a failed charge here. I don't know if they attempted to redirect into the warrior knights. Um, I suspect they didn't. And with the Rot Within on, I probably wouldn't have done. Oh, actually, I'm not sure the what Rot Within is particularly relevant to that combat. I might have been tempted to do it, right? Because at this point, the Empire probably has to try and win a combat. As much as difficult as it is to win a combat against these warriors, right? Because they're all pretty tough. I might have been tempted to try and redirect. I can't remember if you did. Anyway, it all ends up as a failed charge like that, which is, again, have to chase directly after that sorcerer and keeps the warrior knights in the front, but unfortunately is now in the flank of these warriors who would pretty easily smash up like any of these units right now because they haven't taken any damage to this point. Which again, rewinding, might have been why I'd have got the Imperial Guard into the Fallen and tried to use as more shooting turns against this main warriors unit to try and soften them up a little bit if you could. Um, yeah, okay. Well, even so, we do get a rally though. The Imperial Guard do rally, so that's great for Hyper G. But they are kind of stuck behind the behind the Gunners though, because the Gunners don't want to move. Because of course, you know what they want to do. Yep, they're ready aim firing right now. I've got these warriors who are sat right in front of them, and they don't want to move. They don't want to do it because they want to maximise their damage potential in that shots. Because we saw what they could do even against heavily armoured fallen unit last turn. And we go into the magic phase. Oh no, we don't have a magic phase because there's no max anymore, no wizard to have to be found. So no more magic for the Empire, unfortunately. But we do get some pretty tasty shooting. He actually rolls some incredible rolls. I can't remember. I think he got 7 hits. Maybe, yeah, I think it's 7 hits, 6 wounds, which is absolutely insane. But some really good armor saves from Hyper G kind of brings it back to more closer to average, but still not bad at all. Loses 3 of these guys, so again, that's just pretty decent. But again, passes his panic check. Unfortunately for Hyper G, I think that's one of the main ways you can beat the Warriors list. Actually, is you can easily, not easily, but you can certainly force quite a few panic checks on them. Ideally, especially with this Empire versus Warriors matchup. Yeah, forcing a bunch of panic checks, and they have got reasonable discipline of 8, I think, on all their units. But eventually, you'd hope they're going to fail one. But Lucky Sixes will not fail any panic checks, unfortunately, for Hyper G, not on discipline 8 anyway. So yeah, but again, that's some significant damage to these warriors, though. So not to be sniffed at all there for that shooting phase. Over to Lucky Sixes now, and declares both these charges. So declares a charge into the from the warriors into the handgunners, and also this charge warrior knights into the electoral cavalry. Now at this point, I believe I think he considered again. You'd normally consider fleeing some of these, but I mean, if he flees that one, he'll go through the Imperial Guard, causing another panic check on them. Then these guys are probably able to redirect into the side of the knights there, or redirect into the Imperial Guard. I mean, I believe I think it's just a question of like, well, okay, I did. So I guess he's thinking if these, assuming those beat the handgunners, they will then pursue into my Imperial Guard. Either way, I'm going to have to take a panic check on my Imperial Guard, and but there's a chance handgunners might do a bit of damage to them before they get into the Imperial Guard, and then if they can win that fight, maybe he can win the game. He's only got one turn left though, so it's really hard right now for Hyper G to do. He can't really flee because if he flees, then he's completely abandoning the objective, which is the aim in the game, of course. Um, so yeah, I guess. Hmm. Not sure, but anyway, Hyper-G decides to hold both these charges just to give him just because it's like it's nearing it's the last turn of the game for him next turn, so he's kind of got to stay near this objective at this point. So again, he was disappointed that his shooting and magic and so on hadn't done a little bit more damage in the early phases, and now he's just got to go for the melee and just see how well he can do. And I believe though, there's some pretty crazy dice rolling. So this one was a pretty easy roll and he made it. This one was also a pretty easy roll, but he rolled. Have they moved yet? I don't think so. Yeah, anyway, he rolled I think he rolled a double one on these warriors, which was absolutely insane. So yeah, these warriors just like turned around, like shuffled forward like a tiny amount, managed to fail this charge, even though he only needed like a three or a four, maybe. It's four plus, yeah, it's like eight. It looks like about 7, 8 inches there. Like it was absolutely crazy. That so Lucky Sixes did definitely did not live up to the failing this charge was like, okay, maybe now the Empire of Sonstall has a big chance here, right? Because that failed charge was just horrible. Like and on a double one as well, so they barely move at all. Like incredibly bad roll there. But the Warrior Knights did make it into Hyper G's electoral cavalry. However, we go to that combat, and they roll off this. This is kind of like, again, as we said, the Rock Within's gone now as well. I think the magic phase did not go too well either for Lucky Sixes. Was not having a lucky turn at all in this turn three. Um, yeah, loses one of his warrior knights as well, and I don't think it did any damage to the yeah, no damage whatsoever. So, he had to rally his wizard. That's right. So he rallied his wizard, but was probably out of range with anything, or could only rot within, and it was stopped. Can't remember. But anyway, it wasn't a good magic phase, and it wasn't a good charge phase, wasn't a good magic phase, and now also wasn't a good combat phase because loses one of those warrior knights. Didn't break though. So that was that at least. I think it was, yeah, it would have been a push actually because they would have had the charge bonus for 1 point of combat resolution. But yeah, very iffy this combat now. I think Hyper is saying if he'd known it was going to go like that, he would have charged them for sure. But again, this is the thing when you're only rolling a small numbers of dice in these very small combats. Like it can really get very swingy. Like the chance of things hitting around the averages are actually very low. Like it's kind of going to easily go one way or the other. Um, so yeah, really looking like a really lucky turn there. Turn three was like all Hyper G there in the Warriors phase as well, like just immense. Um, so I'm losing track of the combat phases here. So yeah, in the sorry, right, yes, get this sorted. What happened was here. Sorry, don't have too many screenshots here. What happened was though, I'll talk you through it, guys. This is Hyper G's last turn. Chooses to charge with his handgunners, believe it or not, against the warriors, and the reason was to try and get them into a combat into the zone. I believe they couldn't make it into the zone. Oh no, maybe they could. They could have just moved in, but then would have received a charge back themselves. So, yeah, anyway, they calculated it all. The Warriors decide to flee that charge, even though you'd probably expect them to easily beat the handgunners, even receiving a charge from them. Um, if they did get charged, then the Imperial Guard could probably get in as well, though, because then it would become a valid charge from the Imperial Guard because you could then maneuver them out. So to make sure the Imperial Guard and the handgunners couldn't both get in with that charge against them, he chooses to flee, and there's a pretty good chance to stay within the circle and be able to rally. And there's a pretty good chance it would cause the handgunners and or the Imperial Guard, if they could do it, to actually get a failed charge, which may or may not take them into the circle. So what Lucky Six is doing here is, as we said at the start, actually playing for the objective. It seems like crazy that you'd ever want to run away from a fight you can win, but here it was like you calculated it and believed this was his best chance of winning the game. I mean, these guys are so tough. Maybe they could have took the charge from both of those units and still won. But yeah, if the Imperial Guard could get in two, it was looking a little bit iffy. So yeah, by fleeing this, he basically prevented that, and then managed to get the sort of flee distance that he wanted. Didn't get out of the circle. These are fleeing right now though, so he does have to make that rally check to this for this to work out. The Imperial Guard then left without a valid charge because I believe they're out of range. Um, I hope they were anyway, because he could have done that trick that Lucky Sixes did, which would have been to declare a charge against them and then push them off further, which would have been a great way to force a draw. But unfortunately, didn't roll far enough with these handgunners to get into the circle. I don't think they could. I think he needed maybe he needed a six, but didn't get it, or even with a six because of the wheeling and things like that. I'm not sure they could get there. But yeah, pretty unfortunate here for Hyper G. The combat phase, however, goes pretty well for him. Finishes off that last Warrior Knight. Again, would have caused some panic checks if anyone was around, but no one was. And then Hyper-G made the comment at this point, and then just moves up with his Imperial Guard because they can't get past these silly handgunners that are getting in their way. Hyper-G pointing out here, although he's got nothing in the objective, he's only lost two models. So he's only lost his wizard and one electoral cavalry, whereas he's managed to wipe out two units of the Warriors of the Dark Gods. But should the Warriors of the Dark Gods make this rally check here, he's going to lose the game anyway because it's all about the objective. And he does roll a 4, makes the rally check, and then also, as insult to injury, gets off his sorcerer, comes back into the battle, of course, gets off a molten copper, kills a couple of knights. Hyper-G fails the panic test on those electoral cavalry, and they do run. But that last bit of the magic and stuff wasn't relevant at all. So yeah, very well played game from both players, really. And we talked about all the things as we went through it. But yeah, really nice play. Some really crazy, like in-depth tactical decisions and things that you can get in the Essence of War. Really fascinating to see kind of like two like experienced players both using all these options like this fleeing, this chaffing, this redirecting charges, all these things that you kind of read them in the like, why would I ever want to do that, right? This battle really showed you some really good demonstrations as to why you might want to take all these options, and that's why they're in the rules, to give you these options, right? But yeah, any of this stuff, so did make that rally, wins 1-0, but like realistically, you'd have to say the Empire were just like this close to winning or drawing this game. It was really kind of like really close battle there. And there's the objective on the map just to show it. And there's a nice little finale shot there. I'm gonna slightly go back, right? So I mentioned this flee option here, and like whether there was any. Actually, go back to, yeah, I think it was like that. Go back to, actually no, let's go back to where they were before it was declared, right? So it declared a charge with the handgunners first. That had a flee reaction, and then there wasn't a valid charge. We believe, I hope so. I hope he measured that out, because if that was even a double six, right, to there, if that was within 12 plus 4, 16. Can I do maths? Just about. If that was within 16, then that would have still been a valid. Although, no, it probably wouldn't have been actually, because there's no way for them to wheel around handgunners. Right. But no, I don't think there's any other way to do it actually. I think Hyper-G played this well. I was wondering, right? No, you can't. You have to take only, yeah, so again, you couldn't have declared it. I was wondering if, right, so there's a little cheeky thing here I noticed. I don't know if this zoom will work on the thing, but this guy's actually stood on the hill, I reckon, by about 1 millimeter. So I was like, could the back unit, because they could see him, declare a charge, knowing that this front unit's also going to try and charge them? And I don't think you can do that because you have to declare them in an order in which they would become valid, as it were. So yeah, I don't think there was any other way around that. So yeah, I think that really well played from both guys. So yeah, fascinating battle, lots to learn for me and probably anyone really. Who's watching this and interested in Essence of War. Shows you all the tactical depth of the game. And I've probably gone on far too long again, so let me know what you think. Hopefully this will stay interesting for everyone. And I'm about to play a battle of this now, so I had better get going. Cheers, guys, and see you later.